Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Now, we think of ransomware as being something new, but I'm joined today by Eddy Willems, a security and cyber expert, co-founder of the European Institute for Computer Antivirus Research and author of several books on cybercrime. And Eddy, you were working for a Belgian insurance firm in 1989 and you bought a computer magazine with a free floppy disk on the front of it. Tell us what was supposed to be on the floppy disk and what was actually on it and what happened to your computer.
Yeah, well, actually, I thought it was something like a questionnaire, something like it was trying to find out how how you would fit into something like what your profile was to become infected with the AIDS virus, the biological one, of course. And that's how it was proposed actually to me. So I thought I'm going to run it, and I started up the computer and I filled in all the questionnaires, all the questions. Afterwards, there was a printout on my printer, some statistical information, and I thought, okay, nothing interesting. So, but suddenly, after a couple of days, I couldn't access my computer anymore. So it was so every data on my computer was encrypted. Now, I got a little bit luck with me because I found the solution in like 10 to 15 minutes. So not a cryptologist or something like that, but still I was able to, to decrypt actually the whole thing. And that's part of the whole story actually, because afterwards I thought it was just like a bug or something like that, but it wasn't a bug. It was actually something, a problem with the disk, and actually it was the first ransomware.
Yeah, so this was, and I think at the time it was dubbed, if I'm not mistaken, AIDS ransomware. That's what it was kind of loosely called at the time. And like discs had been sent to subscribers of, I think it was PC Business World magazine. We know who created it as well, don't we? It was a biologist called Joseph Popp. And yeah, and it's apparently he handed out 20,000 of these infected discs to attendees of the World Health Organization's AIDS conference. What was going on there?
Yeah, well, the strange thing is, of course, because it is seen as the first ransomware, actually. And if you look at it, he was asking me $189 to send it in an envelope, to a PO box in Panama.
So cash.
Yeah, just in cash. And then theoretically, if I wouldn't be able, of course, to read and do decrypt the whole thing, then he would have sent me something like a decryption key or something to decrypt my whole PC. So that was the thing behind it. But the strange story, of course, is that he sent it out to to 20,000, well, more like 10 to 20,000 copies worldwide. Now think about that, it's 20,000 copies, floppies, multiplied by whatever, this makes a large amount of, in dollars or in pounds or whatever, it's a lot.
But why do we know why he did this? Because this was quite an interesting guy. He, some of his other, accomplishments. He was a biologist. He studied baboons in East Africa for 15 years. He opened a butterfly conservatory in New York. Why was he sending out floppies with ransomware on it?
Well, we think that some people didn't like what he was saying. He has done some AIDS research, but that wasn't well perceived by a lot of people. And I think he was trying to get the attention, or he was trying to at least to get visibility for. But that didn't work out quite well actually. After a while, also he was found completely he was not put in jail, but he was sent back actually because he was really behaving very strange. Was he mad? We don't know actually, but it was a very, very strange personality. Yeah,
It was
thank God.
certainly a very strange thing to do. Anyway, he passed away in 2007, so we may never know his exact reasoning. But for today's conversation, for the purpose of today's conversation, this was, I think, as you have said, the first instance of ransomware as we know it,
Yes,
1989, 1990.
yes, exactly. And this is why, by coincidence, that I was involved in this story. Now, the psychology behind it is actually the same thing as we are, having the same problems now. It's actually the same thing, if you look at it. What we are doing now, we are doing exactly the same wrong mistakes. We are, yeah, behaving in the same way, and this is actually what is happening now as well, with all these scams which we are seeing these days.
Mm. Yeah, but they're not being sent out by biologists who are annoyed with the medical establishment for ignoring their views. Like there's usually where we are told huge commercial impetuses. It's a very, very big business. I mean, ransomware, they're kind of professional setups almost. They'll take your payment. They operate something like call centers, what is the most convincing scam you've seen recently that maybe even tech savvy people might fall for?
Well, I think there are two levels in that kind of way. One is what I call the typical level for like you and me could be, very convinced in. Like, so one that really stands out, in my opinion, is what we call an account takeover scam.
Hmm.
And this is done through very convincing phishing mails sent out, combined actually with real-time interaction. So it's no longer just like a fake email asking you to click on a link. It's attackers now who are creating a full scenario. So you receive, for instance, a message that looks like it comes from your bank or Microsoft or Google or whatever, telling you there is a suspicious activity. And then when you click the link, the page looks absolutely perfect. Sometimes even using like legitimate infrastructure kind of things. So, but the clever part is what happens next. As soon as you try to log in, a real person from the criminal group may contact you by phone
Hmm.
and pretending to be support or somebody else or somebody from your bank, guiding you through the whole process. Meanwhile, they capture your credentials and even bypass like multi-factor authentication if you have that on your account. So what makes this dangerous that even technical experienced people, in my opinion, can fall for it. So that's because the attacks combines actually that technology with social engineering, more or less.
Hmm.
Like the social engineering, which was done like before, with the floppy, sending it out, try to convince you to put it in your computer. This is the same kind of way, but it's now, of course, completely new. And criminals are very good psychologists, of course, so they know what
Yeah.
they do. So this is one level. There is a second level,
Just
what I
before you go
call.
on to the second level, though, just on that first level,
Yeah.
you're so right that anyone at the right moment can be taken in by this. About 2 months ago, I got a call from somebody purporting to be from my mobile telephone provider, telling me that there'd been suspicious activity and that they were going to send me through, for security reasons, they were going to text me through a code, and that I shouldn't do anything with it. I should just tell them what the code is. And for about a half a second, I almost did that.
Yeah.
My kind of journalistic beat kicked in after a few seconds, and to tell me, no, I know what's going on here. They're looking for the code because they are, while I am talking to them, they are trying to get into my account on their own computer. If I give them the code, this is it, that they will get in, and then they'll wreak havoc on my accounts. But it's that moment of fear and panic and concern that you have when somebody who sounds authoritative and real phones up and then, for double reassurance, tells you that they're sending you a code for security purposes. All the language sounds correct.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's the problem, because it sounds so correct, that we are thinking this is normal, this
Mm.
is correct, this is, and there is also that kind of urgency thingy inside it, you need to handle quickly, you need to do it
Yeah.
quickly because otherwise well, and of course we are curious as well, because what is this? What should I do? And this is a typical human thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on. There's a second level you were about to tell me.
There is a second level indeed, and the second level is really professional, and this is what we call, how should I say it? We call it North Korean solitaire scams. And what is this kind of thing? Actually, it's well, there is a job opening in a company, and then you see that some people are trying to, well, having their video interview or something like that. And what we see sometimes these days is that there are some, we've seen some video interviews with some, well, not real people actually, with deep fake video, in real life, giving the interview in front of, with the company itself. And that's what we see. It's like having me over here, but I'm not Eddy Willems, somebody completely else from North Korea. And that's also another one which is nearly, we are nearly unable to detect it. And even for us, even for experts, it's very, very, very difficult to see it.
And what's going on there, Eddy? Like what is the purpose to that, or what are they trying to do?
Well, the purpose is, at this moment, it's a little bit unknown. We think at this moment that they are trying to spy on us, because they try, if we look at them, then we see that it's actually targeting, well, they are targeting big companies like, the multinationals actually. And I think, well, at least some other experts are having the same meaning about that.
And so, sorry, the format here is a fake interview. Is it a job interview? Is it that kind?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is a job interview, actually. And the thing is, they are so convincing that they sometimes are actually added, well, they're accepted.
You mean they're given the job? So they are the candidate, but they're actually
they are the candidates.
But they're so convincing that they make it to the next round. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and they made it to the next round, and they made it to the last round, even there. And actually, we've seen cases where even security companies are being targeted like that, and that they even handed over a laptop.
So maybe maybe if I am the North Korean hacktivist here, maybe I'm trying to get the company to divulge information or the kind of data that they wouldn't normally divulge, because they think that they are giving me an idea about what they do, or the scope of what they do, or the depth of what they do, or who they deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but still, it's a very strange situation. We've seen this recently coming up, and we've seen this in several cases, and we've seen this really targeted to the bigger companies. So it's not that, well, we see this in a lot of cases, but at least it's a problematic thing which is going on. And maybe during our discussion later on, this will come up again.
And you said North Korean there. Is that a common origin source for this type of attack?
Yes, we have several. Let us say we have several evidences, and we saw several targets as well. And at this moment, it seems to be only coming from North Korea. So we didn't see anything from other kind of.
It's funny with North Korea, because in the rest of culture and our public narrative and how we think about different countries, we build up stereotypes in our minds. And for North Korea, we think about them as being secretive, maybe a little backward in some ways, and having a nuclear weapon. And yet, they're always mentioned as one of the big three or big four or big five when it comes to cyber crime and hacktive sophistication in terms of nous. It's always been a funny one for me. I mean, the Russians and the Chinese, okay, you can it kind of fits with the degree of sophistication that they have in other areas of their business and, military development. The North Koreans, we sort of think about them sometimes as, having food rations, and yet they're absolutely up there.
Yeah, that's true. But they concerning cyber power, they are very powerful, and it's not the only country actually. Also, Iran actually, which
Yeah.
is
What did we make of
they
that?
have
Yeah.
also a lot of cyber power, which is completely underestimated in a lot of cases.
And
Yeah,
it's kind of extraordinary. It's probably a different podcast episode, but we had an incident last week. I say we. I mean, in Ireland, we have a branch of a multinational company called Stryker. It's a medical devices company, $130 billion company, was hit by an Iranian supported hacktivist group, we think.
yeah,
And they have a big base in Cork, 4,000 people. So they were all shut out of their devices. And I remember at the time, a lot of us thought, oh, okay, so now the Iranians might actually go after US commercial interests and multinational interests like that, Amazon in the Middle East, and a company like this. Are we right to think that? Should we be worried about that kind of stuff? Particularly in Ireland, we, as you know, we have, half of Europe's big US multinationals are based here. And this is
yeah.
setting up off alarm bells in our heads.
I know. Same in Belgium, by the way.
Mm.
So we also have a lot of multinationals. It's the same situation, exactly the same as in Ireland, I think. And that is definitely something we need to be worried about, and we need to be to be awake about it. Just to be in case if there is something happening or going to be happening. The thing is that a lot of power is there. Striker is indeed one incident which we've seen before, and which if you look at it, it was a very interesting attack because more than 80,000 PCs were wiped.
Mm.
We've seen a similar attack also in the Middle East, Eastern region, but that's years ago. So it's not the completely same thing, but still, these things we need to be very careful about.
And our data centers as well. Somebody was making a
Yeah,
point to me that a lot of the data center operators and a lot of the companies using them in the Middle East are being told to migrate north for your data center needs. The EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Well, you should probably migrate from the Middle East up to the EBIT to Europe because you're out of harm's way there. But of course, if you are a target for Iranian groups, then the data centers that are here, there's plenty here in Ireland, I don't know about Belgium, then maybe those are targets too.
data centers can be a target always in different ways. So, not like bombing data centers, because that's, of course, also another thing which can be done, of course. But indeed, the cyber attack against the data center is always a problematic thing, because data centers are, the core behind everything, our internet infrastructure sometimes. So these are things, of course, which are looked into very careful. A lot of security, but the whole security industry is, of course, monitoring the whole situation continuously concerning something like that. So I'm not completely worried about it, but it's something at least we need to find out. Definitely in the long term, if we can, be safe in any way. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And just to go back to the more garden variety scams and stuff that we're seeing at the moment, which ones do you think are growing fastest right now in Europe?
In Europe, I think it's a combination. I think if you see across Europe, we see rapid growth in investment scams, for instance, and crypto fraud. This is what we see a lot. So, like, criminals promise high returns and use professional-looking website and fake advisors. Something like this is something we see. Romance scams. These are completely different than what we talked about just a couple of minutes ago, of course, but still.
I don't. I'm not sure if I've heard of a romance of a North Korean deepfake lulling somebody from County Galway, a widower or a widow into a romance scam. Although, as hurtful and as damaging as those can be. I've talked to several police officers here, and quite a few people taken in by those romance scams every year, and they're very embarrassed by it. You know,
That is true. Yeah, it's an embarrassing thing if you fall for a romance scam because, yeah, you it's not a good thing for yourself.
especially if you're from a small town in Ireland,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
kind of
So,
you
but that is
what you worry
possible.
about, is that everybody thinks that you're a fool. You know,
Yeah, true. But
and
it's
they say that suppresses the number of incidences that are actually reported.
Oh yes, that is definitely true. What we see as reported in the whole of Europe is just like a small amount of what is really happening. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely. Definitely something like these kind of scams, because of course, like data leaks, they need to be, that's regulated by law to publish it these days. But concerning scams, there is no law,
Mm.
saying that you don't need to. So a lot of people are not, going to the police, to the law enforcement for this. So that's definitely a problem. Phishing remains the number one entry point, in my opinion. Phishing is used for everything because we always think that phishing is there for bank fraud or like these scams I was talking about also a couple of minutes ago. But phishing has been used also to get inside a company, and even to a lot of the big ransomware attacks what we've seen in recent months are just coming from phishing mails, reaching the wrong person in a company which clicks on it, and and the rest is of course history. So these kind of things are problematic as well. And of course, if you say phishing, there is still also smishing. Also in Ireland,
Hmm.
we've seen that also a lot actually. So smishing, so the combination of scam messages via SMS is something we see also a lot in the region of Ireland and the UK.
And other than protective software or filters or industry level filters, one thing I do wonder about is to what extent personal responsibility or action can mitigate any of this stuff. Like, should you be changing your password, more frequently? I remember they used to tell us you should be changing your password, every 2 months, every 3 months. And I know that most people don't do that. They just don't. A lot of people, I would say, don't change their password more than once every 2 or 3 years. And I do wonder whether that kind of invites on trouble.
Well, the whole thing, there is one point. Well, there are two things very important in security. And one of them are passwords, which are actually quite old. We shouldn't use passwords anymore, in my opinion. We should have used, or we should use for everything,
Mm.
multi-factor authentication.
Yeah,
So,
but for logins, like if a normal person, they might have, say, a Google account, they'll have a Meta account, they'll have an iCloud account, for example,
yeah.
and those revert back to usually to login passwords, even if you have multi-factor authentication on several
Yes.
devices.
Well, not completely, because if you switch it on, there is effectively one of these settings which you can use, and then if you click on multi-factor authentication,
Mm.
it's actually asking you to use, of course, a second device or a second kind of way to prove that you are, the person who you should be.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it's most of the time, it's like it's not only your PIN or a password, but it's also your smartphone that receives a login code or something like that, which you need to put in again. And so I think this is something we should do for nearly everything,
But it's still, I mean, I'm using the word password, but it's still a code. It's still a login, you
It's
know?
still a login. There are other solutions as well. There are, but it's, you can use also your face recognition. You can use
Yeah.
your
Oh, I mean, I absolutely use all of those. In recent weeks, actually, funny we're talking about this. I started to see a rash of attempted logins on some of my accounts including like texts to my phone or to my smartphone saying that my two-factor authentication code was such and such a thing, repeated, coming from Erbil in northern Iraq or somewhere in India. Of course, I went and immediately changed all of my login credentials, and I haven't had a problem since then. But it seemed clear to me that at some point, more of my credentials were exposed somehow.
Well, theoretically, if you have multi-factor authentication there, it shouldn't be the case because you are protected against it.
Oh no, I was protected. I don't think my data was actually exposed because the multi-factor authentication stopped the attack.
Yeah.
But the fact that they got that far.
Already your password, for instance. Yeah, and something like that. I know. Well, that's the problem, The thing is, we should be able to handle that maybe in a better way. I think multi-factor authentication is just one stop in the next phase. We will have different ways to handle that. Face recognition is one of them. You have other ways as well at this moment. You have a key which you can use. But not everybody is using something like that. And that's definitely one of the problems as well. And not for everything. And that's also a problem because, we should use it for everything. We should use it for social media. If I ask people which are coming to my lectures, if I ask people, how many of you have multi-factor authentication for, X or, Instagram or Facebook or whatever, then you see, something like 10 to 20% put up their hand, and that's all, which is not good, So I hope this can change because this is the first step, and then the second step will be a better evolution in the way of handling this.
Well, Eddy, there's a lot more to talk about, but I'm afraid we are out of time. Where can people go to find out more of what you're talking about or writing about?
Oh my God! I think it's everywhere on the internet. I think
everywhere.
But you should be very careful.
Yeah.
I think you definitely can. Well, I think even AI knows a lot about it these days. So that's even and they're not hallucinating about it. So you can even ask ChatGPT or whatever, Gemini or whatever you want. About it. There are some governmental websites which you can use. There is a Europol website which you can use.
And then there's some of those tools that we've become used to. I used to use a few years ago, haveibeenpawned.com. That was quite helpful.
Yes, definitely. Have I Been Pawned is a very good website to find out if you're being hacked or not.
Yeah.
Or if your password has been used in some kind of attack or not. So I think that's definitely one of that's a very good solution as well. But I think there is a lot of information out there, and I think every country in Europe has some landing page where you can find something. It's very difficult to say because it's really spread out in a lot of ways. Even, in my opinion, underestimated is just the website from your security provider. You have an antivirus on your system, so go to that security provider. It has a page which is not about the commercial stuff. It's about there are blogs about it.
Who does that though, Eddy? Other than you and I, of course. But who does that? Do people even know that their device has a security provider? I mean, it's something like your IT administrator in your commercial office might talk to you about or lecture you about. But at home, I mean, the days of like going out and buying antivirus software, they seem to be over.
Yes, because it's integrated into the system. Yeah, and the only problem with it, because that's the problem with the cyber criminals, the first thing they do is testing it with that kind of software, and if they see it is passing, then they send it out, and then they are using it, or and then the system can be misused. So I think it's always good to also maybe buy a solution from different security vendors. I think there are so many good out there. and they can help you. And there are some very good European solution providers as well at this moment. So, in my opinion, if it comes to security, I always buy my software. Don't use free things because they will be used in the beginning all the way, or they will be misused in the beginning.
Okay, well, if you are worried about not only your password being compromised, but also those North Korean deepfake interviewers, you've heard here the advice from Eddy Willems, cybersecurity expert with WavKey. Buy some stuff, invest in your own security, and that's probably the way to do it. Alan Kelly was on sound today. JJ Clark produced this episode, and I'm Adrian Weckler, and you've been listening to or watching The Big Tech Show, and we'll talk to you soon.